Suspicion by Absolute Anonymous. They came once a week without fail. Every Friday, at precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Rarity would find herself interrupted by the chime of her doorbell, and always, again without fail, she would promptly rise to answer it, wearing her best customer service smile to greet whoever was on the other side. But it would never be a customer who waited for her. Instead, it would be the mailmare, the grey Pegasus with an unusual cutie mark, who came to bring a letter for Rarity clenched between her teeth. Every time, Rarity would take the letter with a nod and a thank you before sending the Pegasus away. She would retire to her private office, quickly shutting the door to ensure that she was alone before opening it to read. Then, once that was done, she would drop the letter in her desk before locking the drawer and never looking at it again. The letters always said the exact same thing. Rarity didn't need to read them anymore, really. She could have just recited them by heart. Your sister misses you, you know. Heck, we miss you too. It's been ages that we've seen you. Why don't you come and visit more often? Well, we suppose you're busy running your business and all, but we'll be sure to stop by next time we're in the area, though. Please write back this time. Remember to take care of yourself. Always the same. Love, Mom and Dad. Exactly the same. I suppose that will have to do, Rarity said with a sigh, taking a step to admire her work. She had outdone herself, and the unicorn decided with some satisfaction. Pinkie's last gala dress had boiled down to a traditional party dress, the sort of dress that a filly might have worn if dressed by her parents, all frills and crinolines and bows. Which has worked fairly well on Pinkie Pie, true, but it has also been so foolish. Rarity had almost been embarrassed by it. With this gown, Rarity had taken Pinkie Pie's dress in an entirely new direction, a more mature direction, with fabric of a softer, more subdued shade of rose, floating and delicate and lovely, and a design better fitting the mare Pinkie Pie was becoming. At least, that's what Rarity chose to believe, but instead of behaving like a grown mare, Pinkie Pie squealed like a little filly before leaping off the low platform she had been restricted to for most of the afternoon, while Rarity made the final modifications to her dress for this year's Grand Galloping Gala. She practically skipped to one of Rarity's many mirrors to examine her reflection. "Oh wow!" Pinkie Pie cried, giving happy little twirls before the glass that sent her skirts flaring. "This dress is so poofy! I just want to spin in it all day and watch the skirt go all twirly!" Rarity didn't answer, focusing instead on collecting the pins scattered on the floor. The fitting had taken so much longer than it would have. Pinkie hadn't been able to stand still at all. She had instead spent the entire afternoon wriggling and knocking about the pins askew, and then giggling and apologizing just before doing it again. Rarity couldn't help but feel relieved that they were finally done. It would have been lovely to have some peace and quiet after spending an entire afternoon with Pinkie Pie. Pinkie Pie was quite likable, really, even lovable in her own way. After all, the Earth Pony was friendly and sweet, with a cheerful disposition and a knack for getting others to smile. But the truth was, she wasn't actually the kind of pony Rarity would have sought out to befriend before she'd met Twilight. It wasn't a conscious thing by any means, and the unicorn didn't actively seek to discriminate, but Rarity was something of an elitist, by her own admission, and she couldn't really help but mentally divide those around her according to class and status. It was wrong, she knew, but most of Rarity's life had been spent seeking out those who'd be able to help her rise above the dismal family situation, and, well, old habits die hard. Even though now she ran a successful business of her own, a business that had finally pulled her out of her parents' embarrassing shadow, Rarity still often found herself instinctively scoping out social situations for potential connections. She still found herself quietly judging others with her two discerning eyes before she felt comfortable pronouncing them worthy of her time. Rarity loved her friends dearly and wouldn't have traded them for anything in the world, but, well, occasionally she found herself turning to that too discerning eye on them, And if she were to be completely honest, which she rarely was, Pinkie Pie just simply didn't fit. Not the way Rarity found others to be fit. The unicorn had found something to respect and admire in all of them. Even Rainbow Dash, as lazy as he was, after all, had ambition, which was something Rarity understood completely. All of them, except Pinkie Pie. Oh yes, Pinkie Pie was certainly likable enough, good-natured and charming, but she was also so frivolous. Rarity might have been a pony fond of luxury, but she wasn't one to waste things either. She always knew how to put them to good use. But Pinkie Pie, even her special talent was mindlessness. If parties were supposed to change the world or help you succeed, the worst part of it all was that Pinkie Pie made no effort whatsoever to improve herself. She was childish and shallow, and fully intended to accomplish nothing at all with her life. She just didn't care. And all that could be lovely every once in a while. It could be fun. It could be entertaining and pleasurable. But there was nothing about Pinkie Pie that Rarity could actually respect. Not only that, she was irritating. Loud and nonsensical, constantly fidgeting and twitching and breaking out in the most ridiculous of ways, coming out of nowhere and doing things for no reason at all, other than, oh, well, I just felt like it. Pinkie Pie was hyperactive and ridiculous and completely out of control, and if there was one thing Rarity couldn't stand, it was a lack of control. Applejack was bad enough with her blatant disregard for the rules of etiquette and propriety, not to mention her inclination to go days without brushing her mane. Pinkie Pie, though, just took it a step further, utterly disregarding the rules of reality itself. It was far too much to expect of a creature accustomed to order and perfection the way Rarity was, to cope with a creature as chaotic as Pinkie Pie, who couldn't even be bothered to tame her hair. Violet saw Pinkie Pie as an enigma, a mystery to be studied and solved. Rainbow Dash thought Pinkie Pie was hilarious, and wasn't above using Pinkie Pie's many quirks to her own advantage. For example, by weaponizing her babbling in order to blackmail some pony. Fluttershy seemed almost frightened of the pink pony, but then again, she was frightened of just about everything. Applejack alone seemed to just accept Pinkie Pie as who she was, unquestioning of her many oddities, but maybe it was some kind of earth pony thing. Rarity couldn't help but feel annoyed by her. Even now, as Rarity continued to tidy her workspace, gathering pinks and ribbons, rolling them up in the measure tape, Pinkie's incessant chatter only served to get on her nerves. What she was saying didn't even make sense anymore. It had long ago stopped being about the dress, and had at some point turned into a list of the pink pony's favorite words. And Picklebarrel and Kumquat in front to say, oh, but so is Pumpernickel. Oh, and Lumbago and Skedaddle. I like Hullagully too. And Belugas? Pinkie Pie, darling, Rarity interrupted, having finally replenished her pink cushion to her satisfaction. I believe we're finished here, so if you just could take that dress off now. Oh, but I like it! It's so pretty and fluffy! Pinkie Pie cried out with a pout, whirling around to face the white unicorn. Her skirt swished and rustled as it did so. It's the prettiest dress I've ever seen, and I'm so excited to wear it. I can't wait to. Careful, Rarity warned. You don't want to rip it, do you? I haven't. Pinkie Pie giggled. Don't be silly, Rarity. I'm not going to. Ding dong, ding dong. Doorbell! Pinkie Pie shrieked, practically leaping 5 feet into the air. Oh my gosh, I'll get it. I love answering doors. In a flash, she was gone, still adorned in her gown, and Rarity sighed before returning to straightening up the room. She had done well, and the unicorn told herself decisively, half in congratulations and half in reassurance. The dress suited Pinkie Pie in a way she hadn't initially expected, but it did suit her. It softened Pinkie Pie's features, somehow giving her a dainty appearance, like a wingless angel almost, hugging and complimenting her curves. Rarity was so lost in her reflection that she almost didn't realize what day it was, or why the doorbell might have been ringing, until she glanced up and noticed the clock. 2 in the afternoon, and it was Friday. Pinkie Pie was the one who was going to answer the door. Oh no. With a gasp, Rarity dropped the ribbon she had been collecting and letting it unceremoniously drop to the ground as she raced towards the door. But Rarity, honey, you're still so young. Mother, Father, I have decided. I know what I want to do with my life and I can't do it here. Why not? Asked her mother, pleading. You can sew here. You can make all kinds of pretty dresses for Sweetie Belle, right? It's not about sewing, Rarity answered, her voice clipped. She spoke with a tension so rarely heard by those outside of her family circle. Then what is it about? Asked her father, also pleading. Is it something we did wrong? All of this is wrong, Rarity wanted to say. The tiny house, the cluttered neighborhood, her amazingly embarrassing parents with their tacky common behavior. Why couldn't they see it wasn't enough? She was bigger than this, bigger than the world they had given her. At least, she wanted to be. But how was she supposed to find out just how large she could grow if she were forever trapped in a family as claustrophobic as this one? The only way she could learn was if she had left, if she had broke away from all of them and began again as the pony she wanted to be. It's not about you, she lied, but Rarity, as young as she was no fool, and she could see the hurt reflected in the eyes of her mother and father. They had heard the deceit in her voice. Rarity arrived just as the door was closing, and there stood Pinkie Pie in the foyer, closely examining the package held by her in her hooves. Rarity! Pinkie Pie cried upon seeing the unicorn, whereas Pinkie Pie almost looked bridal with her ethereal dress and enormous smile. Rarity looked haggard, her perfectly coiffed mane no longer quite so perfect, and her eyes manic behind the red-framed spectacles she wore. You got a package! Oh wait, I guess you've probably already guessed, huh? I mean, why would they deliver somebody else's package to your house? That would be totally weird. But anyway, you got a package, Rarity! Please, give that to me, Rarity answered primly with as much dignity as she could muster, her horn glowing with magic as she attempted to snatch the box away from Pinkie Pie. But Pinkie Pie whipped around, bringing it closer to her face so that she could read the return address scrawled in a corner. Of course, not only did it have to be Friday, but it was the first Friday of the month. Are you gonna open it? What's inside? Can I help? Can I open it for you? Oh my gosh, yes, please, yes, I love opening presents. Packages are kind of like presents, right? Pinkie Pie, give it to me. What does that name say? I can't read. Does it say Magnum? That's a funny name. Who do you know named Magnum? Pinkie Pie, please give it to me, Rarity shrieked. Her voice was cracking in an extremely unladylike way, but desperate times called for desperate measures. And if Pinkie Pie wasn't going to give Rarity the box, she would have to take it by force. A gust of magic knocked into Pinkie, throwing her off balance, and Pinkie fell to the floor, a look of surprise on her face. Rarity flushed, immediately feeling ashamed. She wanted to offer Pinkie Pie a helping hoof, but instead she grabbed the package, safely tucking it behind her, while Pinkie Pie wrote on her own. Rarity opened her mouth to speak, to apologize, but Pinkie Pie spoke first, smiling like always. I'm sorry, Rarity, she said sweetly. I guess I wasn't really listening to you, huh? I do that sometimes. Anyway, is that a secret box? A secret box? Yes, in a way. No, Rarity answered stiffly. It's just, it's not of any of your business is all. Who said it? What's inside? If you'll excuse me, dear, I have some work I need to do, was Rarity's calm reply, said in a falsely cheery way, as she neatly dodged Pinkie Pie's questions. Apparently, the pink pony didn't know the meaning of the phrase, not really any of your business though, but Rarity already knew that. It was another one of Pinkie Pie's faults that continued to grate on Rarity's nerves. Although Pinkie had tended to make a huge fuss over the value of trust and importance of keeping secrets, she was utterly tactless when it came to prying. Rarity's dismissive answer was intended for Pinkie Pie to be a cue to leave, but instead of taking the exit Rarity had been so generously offered to her, the pink pony continued to follow her, trotting alongside the unicorn. If it's a secret box, I totally understand, Pinkie Pie said in a conversational way. I mean, I know all about secret boxes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, huh? I make them all the time. I'm sure you do. Yippers! I don't get many, but I get secret letters though. Only, I guess they aren't so secret if I'm telling you, are they? Oh well, they're mostly secret. Mine are from my sisters. I've been sending them since they were just itty-bitty twinkie Pinkie Pies. I don't get any from my parents though, so you're lucky. That got Rarity's attention. She froze, turning her now wide eyes on Pinkie Pie. When Pinkie looked back at her, her blue eyes shone with a lucidity so rarely seen on a pink pony's face. She wore a look of understanding. I didn't know you had, Rarity began before catching herself. She almost said parents. Sisters, she finished lamely. Pinkie had never spoken of her home life before. Her fillyhood was essentially a mystery, and none of them knew anything at all about her family. All that was known was that the Cakes cared for her like a daughter, and that Pinkie Pie in turn treated them almost like surrogate parents. Oh yeah, Pinkie Pie answered with a little nod of her head. I've got two. I'm the youngest though. For some reason, Rarity had already assumed as much from the moment Pinkie Pie mentioned her siblings. There were times when the resemblance between Pinkie Pie and Sweetwheel was astounding. After all, both of them were generally well-intended and with charming innocent personalities, but they also had ways of always managing to cause trouble for those around them. Somehow, the fact that Pinkie Pie was the younger sister seemed to justify this. Perhaps all little sisters had a way of driving their elders insane. Are you close to your family? Rarity asked, a little hesitant. Maybe it was just that Pinkie Pie was so rarely opened up this much about her past. Maybe it was because Rarity was so naturally curious about what it would be like to grow up as the youngest in a household. But for whatever reason, the question was asked, and Rarity's intentions were genuine, without a hint of malice. She was only curious after all, and therefore wasn't expecting the blunt reply she got. No. Rarity blinked behind her glasses. Why was she still wearing them? I beg your pardon? I said no, not really, Pinkie Pie answered cheerfully, not seeming to be at all bothered. She was bouncing on top of her hoofs, head nodding in time to music only she could hear. I left home when I was little. I didn't really keep in touch with my parents. My sisters write to me sometimes though, and I send them secret boxes with cookies and candies and other stuff I make at the Sugar Cube corner. Rarity glanced down at the box now floating before her. On the first Friday of every month, her mother would send her a care package filled with cookies and other homemade treats, as if Rarity wasn't perfectly capable of providing for herself now that she was an adult. Every time, without fail, she would throw them away, just like she did with the letters, reading them once and locking them away, never replying. She might as well have thrown them out as well. Why aren't you close to your family? Rarity found herself asking. She had no idea why she asked that. With any pony else, such a question obviously would have been a sore spot that she would have been smart enough to avoid. But with Pinkie Pie, for some reason, she felt safe asking. They were mad that I left, Pinkie Pie answered simply. My parents didn't want me to leave home, and I did anyway. I tried writing them a few times later on, but I never got an answer. Then I got letters from one of my sisters saying they'd left too, so I kept in touch with them. But I don't know how my mom and dad are. I'm sure they're doing great though. Pinkie's cheerful attitude very nearly masked a slight tremor in her voice when she spoke of her parents, but the tremor was still there, and it didn't go unnoticed by Rarity. If what Pinkie Pie said was true, then it was nearly the reverse of her own situation, and yet, at the same time, they were so similar. When Rarity's eyes once again met Pinkie's, the unicorn could feel a warmth welling up from somewhere deep inside her. Not the irritation she usually tended to regard the pink pony with, but something like a sense of kinship. Maybe that's why she said what she did next. I left home too. For once, Pinkie Pie didn't seem to feel the need to speak. She only cocked her head slightly, as if she listened curiously. And that was all the encouragement Rarity needed to continue. I left when I was young. Shortly after Sweetwell was born, I decided that I wouldn't want to be trapped in the life my parents had given me. They were good ponies, of course, and I loved them dearly, but I didn't want to be them. I wanted to be more. I had ambitions. I wanted to be more than them. Pinkie Pie nodded. She still didn't speak. Instead, she regarded Rarity with an air of quiet understanding, as if to say, "Yeah, I know what you mean." They're simple, and they're happy with that. They've never wanted more, but I did. I didn't want to be like that. And then I was afraid of growing older, and deciding I didn't want to do things anymore either, so I decided to get out while I could. Me too, Pinkie Pie said simply, prompting Rarity to cock an eyebrow. After I got my cutie mark, I decided I wanted to go out and see the world, but my parents told me life couldn't be all fun and parties all the time, and that I needed to work too. So I decided that if I had to work, I wanted a job I could enjoy, and I decided to come to Ponyville. But they were hurt that I didn't stay behind and work on the farm like they did. I think they would have been happier if my cutie mark had been a rock or something. But that's not what I wanted, she explained. It sounded so simple, yet it was unsettling. How Pinkie Pie managed to be simultaneously so serious and yet so casually, especially when she had never told any of the group about any of this before. Rarity didn't know what to say. It was a bizarre kind of honor to be the first hearing one of these words. They wanted you to stay home, Rarity said quietly, and they're mad that you didn't. Yep. My mother and father aren't angry with me, the unicorn said firmly, with a conviction that she wasn't entirely sure she genuinely felt. They're good ponies, and I'm not mad at them either. I didn't leave them because of them. I left because I wanted to be more than them. And that's good, Pinkie Pie said happily, with an eager nod. Kids should want to be more than their parents. I mean, what's the point otherwise? Nobody could grow up or change, and if your parents might be sad or angry, but they might miss you, but they'll still love you. That's why they care so much. If Rarity closed her eyes, she could see a drawer filled with letters, read but never answered. And still, they kept coming, once a week, without fail. She had left home. She had left her family, and she had left her baby sister. They'd all wanted her to stay, but she left anyway. She had been selfish, and she had never forgiven herself for it. Those first few months on her own bed, she had been the loneliest months she had ever spent, bogged down with homesickness and a nameless ache for comfort. Rarity had said goodbye to her fillyhood before she'd been fully ready, and she'd done it all on her own. It would have been so much easier for her to have begun again if her family had just let her go. If only they'd hated her the way she'd hated herself. Rarity wouldn't have missed them so much if they'd just stopped caring. If they just stopped making her miss them. If they didn't insist on coming to see her every so often, putting her in an awkward position of attempting to maintain her carefully, regulated distance from within the same building. What kind of daughter abandoned her newborn sister to pursue a career she had no way of knowing it would succeed? If only her parents would just take the hint and stop writing so dutifully, it would have been so much easier for Rarity to ignore them, to forget them, if they would just have the courtesy of doing the same for her. But Rarity didn't hate them. She just wanted to be more than them. And it had been so very, very selfish of her to want as much, to not be satisfied with what she had been given, and she'd hated herself for it her entire life. It was only now that Rarity noticed her eyes were stinging, probably from the glare of the studio lights. Pinkie Pie's smile was knowing. I bet your parents would be really happy if you just let them know you were okay, she said softly. I bet they worry about you. I know they do that, Rarity snapped. If you love them so much, why let them worry? Because it's easier to ignore them. Getting ignored doesn't make them feel very nice though, Pinkie answered sadly, and Rarity felt another sharp stab of guilt. She couldn't even begin to imagine how it would feel if she were to attempt a reconciliation only for her parents to reject her. Maybe that's why she'd been avoiding them for so long. Fear that they would. No wonder Pinkie Pie was so afraid of being abandoned. What had once seemed to be pure neediness now seemed to take on a new light, now that Rarity knew a little more about her. Well, what about you? Rarity asked for a moment. Can you honestly say that you're completely happy with the things being the way they are? No, but that's okay. I can't exactly agree that that's okay, retorted Rarity with a disdainful sniff. Perhaps I should make the efforts to reconnect with my parents, but it's hardly your fault that you had aspirations greater than those of your parents. Well, Pinkie Pie answered. She looked thoughtful, a strange expression for a pony as light-hearted as she typically was. It's been a while. Maybe I could try again. I sort of gave up after the first few times, or maybe I could try going home for a little while and surprising them. And hey, you could come with me. With you? Rarity repeated, her special silvery laugh to mask how flattering the idea of Pinkie Pie visiting her alone was. As if Rarity was some sort of special friend. Maybe Pinkie Pie had felt the same kinship as well, as the connection of the ponies with ambitions beyond their stations in life. Just very different ambitions. I can't really picture myself, especially enjoying a trip to a farm, darling. But thank you all the same. Oh no! Pinkie Pie cried, zipping towards the unicorn, making Rarity flinch. You'd totally love it! It's not just any kind of farm, it's a rock farm! And you like rocks, right? Especially the pretty shiny ones. A rock farm? Rarity repeated, not entirely certain that she'd heard right. Do you mean a mine? In her head, she was envisioning great fields of gems, but Pinkie Pie didn't seem to have heard her. You gotta come with me when I go, Pinkie Pie declared happily, in the matter of whether or not she would actually go no longer seeming to be in question. And I can help you find all kinds of nice rocks to bring home to Ponyville, and it will be super duper special fun. Pinkie had begun to skip around, head down the hall, back to Rarity's workspace, humming blissfully. Rarity floated the package before her to examine it. Perhaps she should send a thank you note. That was the polite thing to do, after all. She followed Pinkie Pie into her workroom, carefully examining the pink pony from the back. When she looked at Pinkie now, Rarity found that she didn't feel quite as annoyed anymore. Instead, she looked at her with benevolence. There was a lingering sense of companionship between them, of goodwill. Pinkie Pie was sashaying towards the mirror once more when Rarity entered, still dressed in her almost angelic-looking gown. Get out of that dress so I can put it into storage, will you? The unicorn asked, and then... Again, Rarity eyed the box from her parents. She'd opened the box the first time she'd received such a care package. You never tell us how you're doing, so we need to make sure you're getting enough to eat somehow, the note that had come with it said. Inside there had been far too many sweets for Rarity to hope of eating by herself. Would you like to join me for tea? Rarity said for a moment. Since you're already here, I mean. Tea? Pinkie Pie repeated, her face lighting up. Does that mean snacks? Well, I suppose. Yay! Does it mean I can open the secret box now? Before Rarity could respond, Pinkie Pie had snatched the box away and had taken off running. Now that Rarity thought about it, the lucidity Pinkie Pie had displayed earlier shouldn't have surprised her. Knowing Pinkie Pie, she had planned the entire conversation just to get at the food the package contained. Rarity shook her head and smiled to herself before heading to the kitchen to begin preparations for tea. As the water boiled, she pondered. Pinkie Pie was quite likable, really, even lovable, in her own way. The end.